It's now time to talk about biofuels as an alternative to some of the non-renewable resources we're using for fuel here in the United States. And by definition, a biofuel is an energy source that is made up of at least 80% recently living biomaterial. There are many choices of different materials that could be turned into fuel. And just looking here, you got soybean, you have corn, you have sugarcane and switchgrass and sunflowers, peanut oil. There's lots of different choices of things that we can make fuel from. All right, and recently there's been a renewed interest in biofuels. The biofuel industry is expanding rapidly, all right, mainly due to the fluctuation of oil prices. There's always controversy in the oil industry, but also there's an increased awareness of climate change. All right, so biofuel as an alternative, it burns cleaner. With the increased concern of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, biofuel is looked at as an alternative. And then at the bottom here, you see rural development. All right, what we're talking about is farm communities that have a good chance of making money by converting their farms or their land to grow crops that will be turned into biofuels. All right, so you have development in rural areas where there wasn't any development before. So these farmers are converting their farms to grow products to make fuel. All right, and I like this map here, and this shows us a little bit about the biorefineries here in the United States. If you notice here, there's a definite cluster in the central part of the United States for the biorefineries. If you notice, things are somewhat centralized here on one state, and you could name that state. What we're looking at is Iowa. All right, not only is Iowa big in farming, and farmers are looking to sustain their way of life, but what's interesting is that every presidential election starts in Iowa. All right, so if you want to be president, you have to win Iowa, and that's where the biorefineries are. That's where the biofuel industry is prevalent. So every president that I know of recently supports biofuel. All right, so it might just be a coincidence, it might not be, but a lot of government support goes into the biofuel industry. And if you look here, we're looking at the total federal subsidies for the energy industries. All right, ethanol, all right, this type of biofuel, what we're choosing to put our investment in is the highest amount of subsidies that are given by the federal government. All right, they're number one, followed by the oil and gas industry. All right, and rounding out number 3 is the coal industry, and the other non-renewables and renewables after that. But of all the renewables, it seems to be that our focus is mostly on ethanol. All right, so it'll be part of our fuel economy for a while. So we have to consider, is that good or bad? All right, and as we begin to think about that, let's take a look at the different types of biofuels. We'll start here with biogas. All right, biogas is taking organic waste such as manure, all right, or sewage, and we're going to break it down anaerobically, kind of like in a landfill. Landfills do this. They break down materials anaerobically, and then the product is methane. All right, so we're working with bacteria that lives without oxygen, and they're going to break down this organic waste and produce methane, which can be burned as a fuel. All right, so there's tremendous potential, especially for farmers, because all animals produce biogas. All right, and it's a pretty simple process. All right, here you go. You can think about how many ranches and how many farms and how many cows alone are in the ranches around the United States, all producing organic waste that can be used to produce biogas. All right, all animals produce biogas. All right, and here's a little bit about the process, very simply. All you really need is somewhat of a biogas generator, all right, which can be an underground storage tank. So what we have here is our farm where animals are, and that waste gets funneled into some type of underground container. All right, and we add that waste, the cow manure and the organic waste, and we're going to create literally a tank full of waste. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to prevent oxygen from getting in, and we're going to get anaerobic digestion. So as that organic waste breaks down, anaerobically, the methane will bubble up, all right, and collect at the top. So you'll have this, the top layer will be where the methane collects. All right, it forms up and it gets pumped out. And because that methane is can be used as fuel. It goes right up to your house, your business, and you can use it for heat, for cooking, for electricity, and so forth. So in this way, animal waste is turned into a gas by anaerobic digestion and then pumped out and used as a fuel. All right, pretty simple process here. So tremendous potential for farmers or anywhere where there's a large amount of animals, and you can collect and contain that animal waste and turn it into biogas. All right, so if you look up here at the top here, there's an anaerobic digester where this process occurs, and you can see the pipe coming out here where the methane is pumped out and collected and either used or shipped off to be used somewhere else. All right, so biogas is an option. All right, a second type of biofuel is ethanol. All right, this is by far the most common type of biofuel, especially in Brazil. All right, and Brazil is 100% non-oil. Okay, they've moved to work entirely with ethanol for their transportation needs and their energy needs. In Brazil, they make it through the fermentation of sugars. All right, and the sugars that they're using are mainly sugarcane. All right, so remember, we can use many different materials, but it's through the fermentation of sugars that they're producing this fuel. In the United States, we make most of our ethanol from corn. Okay, so we ferment the sugars, and basically what happens is you break up the sugars and ferment them, and it creates something like an alcohol, and then that's able to be burned, and we call that ethanol. Now the concern is it's called the food to fuel debate. All right, so should we be using our cornfields? All right, should we be using our land that's typically used to grow food, and now we're using it for energy? All right, so there's that debate, which is a huge concern. To counteract that food to fuel debate, scientists are developing a new type of ethanol called cellulosic. All right, now cellulosic is taking products like the corn husks, all right, sawdust, the waste product, the stalks. You can even take the wood from a house that you don't need anymore, and you're bulldozing the house. You could take the wood, and you can make fuel from that. So it solves the food to fuel debate because you could still use the corn for food and use the waste product, the stalks and the husks, for this new type of ethanol, the cellulosic. And that's good. It solves that debate. It produces a good amount of energy, and it's a good alternative. The problem is that ethanol has less BTU energy output than other types of fuels. So it doesn't burn as hot, it's not as long lasting as gas. You don't get as good of gas mileage. It may be tough on car engines and essential engine parts. All right, so there's some problems here with ethanol, but it is an alternative, and we have to figure out, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages as an alternative to oil? All right, the problem is that there's not enough corn. All right, if we took the entire U.S. corn production, that means taking all the cornfields in the entire United States, and instead of using it for food, converted all that corn to ethanol, we would still only be able to supply 20% of our energy needs. All right, that means we would only be able to make 30 billion gallons per year, and here's what we use. We use 146 billion gallons a year. All right, so we still wouldn't meet all of our needs if we took all of the corn grown in the United States of America and turned it into fuel instead of food. All right, so this is a very limited source in proportion to the amount of oil that we use, even if we turned all of it to ethanol. All right, ethanol has a relatively low energy yield. All right, if we look at it, the net energy is 1.34, and just to remind you what we're talking about is for every 1 unit of energy we put in, all right, it takes energy to grow the product, it takes energy to harvest it, produce it, transport it. For every 1 unit of energy we put in, we get 1.34 units of energy out. All right, it's not terrible, but it's not a really good number. Okay, again, we get lower miles to the gallon with ethanol, and that food to fuel debate will keep coming back. All right, and the last disadvantage here is, we're converting a lot of our land to grow energy, and that's a concern. So let's look back at Brazil. Brazil is proud to be 100% oil free, but is it worth it? To have the cost be the rainforest. So that's very alarming to environmentalists, to lose rainforest to use that land to grow product for fuel. All right, so you have the value of getting rid of the oil, but does that offset, by cutting down the rainforests? So you continue to weigh these options as we go through here, and weigh the benefits and risks of ethanol as an energy source. All right, let's look at a different type of fuel derived from biomass called biodiesel. All right, so this is a renewable fuel for diesel engines, which is derived from natural oils like soybean oil. That's the most utilized. All right, that's the most common, is from soybean oil. But you can use all kinds of other things like canola oil, peanut oil. You could even use grease from local restaurants. All right, and what we do here is we blend it with gasoline, and you'll see B20, which means that it's 20% biodiesel and 80% petrodiesel in the fuel. So 20% of that fuel would be soy-based, and we can blend it. So there's no reason to convert any engine parts to be able to burn this type of fuel. It's already ready to go. All right, so biodiesel is something that we need to look at because there's basically a market for this. All right, if you look here, it can be used in the pure form or the blended form. All right, it's made from vegetable oils, fats, and greases. But here, take a look at this. In the United States, over 80% of commercially used trucks and buses run on diesel. So there's a huge market for biodiesel. All right, and we have the ability to produce a lot of this, and for a good reason. So let me go through this real quick with you. All right, so you take your renewable resource like soybean or canola oil, all right, and you basically put it through the refining process, and you can take out your food products if you want to. All right, so you don't lose the ability to take out the food product. All right, but then what we're going to do is we're going to produce biodiesel from the oils, the fats, or the greases. All right, and what we're going to do is remove glycerin products, and you can make soap out of that, by the way, so that there's no waste product there. All right, and we're going to turn that stuff into fuel. All right, and we have the technology that exists today to be able to convert it into fuel. You don't even have to change anything about the engine. And what's really great about this biodiesel stuff is that there are some carbon emissions, but we can cut back on greenhouse gas emissions by planting a new crop. So as long as you continue the cycle here and plant new crop to be used for biodiesel, you're offsetting what you've released in carbon dioxide. So there are carbon dioxide emissions, but they're going to be absorbed by your next crop. So it's basically carbon neutral, which is a great idea. All right, you can make this stuff on the small scale. People can make this in their garages, all right, by using waste cooking greases and vegetable oils. Or you can make this on the large scale. All right, and here you go. Here's what a backyard garage system might look like. All right, I know people who actually go around and collect greases and oils from restaurants, and they have these things set up in their garages, and they've converted their engines to be able to run on this stuff 100% on biodiesel. All right, so you do it on a small scale, or here you go, you can do it on a large scale as well. All right, lots of advantages to biodiesel as a fuel source. All right, it's safe and biodegradable. All right, there's significantly less air pollution, and if you go with a pure blend, 100% biodiesel, you can reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 75%. All right, we can make it here. It's a domestic product. All right, you don't have to convert anything. You don't have to do anything to a diesel engine to be able to use this stuff. All right, there's local opportunities, and it has a net energy balance of 3.24. All right, so that's a lot better than ethanol. All right, we get a lot more energy out using biodiesel than we do with ethanol. And you can even use the existing fueling equipment. All right, we don't even have to change anything about our fuel pumps or the infrastructure that we have. All right, this stuff can be used in our current infrastructure. So lots of advantages for biodiesel, but there's also some disadvantages. All right, as of right now, it's a little bit more expensive than our traditional sources of fuel. All right, it's not as available. It can produce sludge in tanks and filters in your car. So you can have problems there, and that's a big one for people. There's a slight reduction in the fuel economy. You don't get as good gas mileage, so you're filling up more often. All right, there could be problems in cold weather, especially for pure blend biodiesel fuels, and you still have those same two problems as you have with ethanol, the food to fuel debate. All right, food for cars instead of people, and then should we be converting land to grow food that's going to be turned to fuel? Again, biofuel as a fuel source is something that we need to consider in weighing these advantages and disadvantages. Hopefully you're gaining a sense of the situation here with biofuels. But we have a new type of biofuel derived from algae. It's basically in the experimental stage at this point, but there is tremendous potential with this new type of biofuel. Instead of using oils or fats or greases, we're going to use algae. You immediately lose the food to fuel debate. All right, we're using algae in this case. It makes a good amount of energy, and it actually has a negative carbon ratio. All right, we can use the concept of carbon sequestration. Algae actually absorbs more CO2 than it gives off when you're burning the product as a fuel. All right, so we're putting carbon dioxide back in the earth in this case. All right, it's carbon sequestration. If you remember from coal, we're putting carbon dioxide back into the earth instead of into the atmosphere. All right, so tremendous amounts of potential for algae as a new source for biofuels. All right, and here you're looking at the biotubes that they're using to grow algae that's going to be processed into fuel. And here's a little bit about the process and how it works. All right, very simply, the first things we have to do is to grow the algae. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to basically starve it of its nutrients. All right, and what that's going to do is it causes the algae to break down. It doesn't literally explode like it's showing in this picture, but it's going to break down into the fats and the sugars. Okay, so we use a solvent to separate the fats and the sugars, and then we can evaporate the solvent away, and we're left with the fats. And that's what we're going to use to make into biodiesel. All right, so what we want are the fats from the algae, and we've basically extracted those to make into biodiesel. All right, tremendous potential with this source of biofuel. All right, so here you go. You have these bioponds where they're cultivating algae. So you'll see these popping up here and there, and you can also use these tubes. So with a pond, you have a limited area where the sun can penetrate into the pond, but if you use these more vertical tubes, you have increased the surface area, and the sun hits more of the surface area, and you can grow more algae. So you'll see this type of design as well. And then you can put these things into these large, gigantic fields where you're basically cultivating algae to make into biodiesel. All right, and this chart does a really good job of showing some of the benefits of algae as a source for biodiesel. All right, what you're looking at is a chart that explains the gallons of oil equivalent per crop acre of what you get out per source. All right, the gallons of oil equivalent. So if you look at corn here, for every crop acre, you'll get 15 gallons of oil equivalent of fuel. All right, and then if you look here, soybeans, sunflower, all right, oil palm, these are basically your biodiesels. All right, a lot better than ethanol, but then take a look at algae. All right, look at the potential here. You're talking 10 to 100 times better. All right, there's so much potential here when it comes to algae as a source for biodiesel. With algae, maybe we can use it as an alternative, but it's just not quite ready yet. All right, there needs to be more research done, but they're getting there. All right, where are we now? We can take a look at this chart which does a real good job of showing the different biofuels. And what we're looking at is gasoline. We're going to compare gasoline with biodiesel, all right, corn-derived ethanol, and then your cellulosic ethanol. All right, and now I should tell you that what's called the first generation biofuels are those that are made from sugars, animal fats, and vegetable oils. All right, we're talking about our biodiesel and our corn-derived ethanol. And then you have your second generation biofuels, which are those that are still being developed. They're made from more or less waste product, and that'll be your cellulosic ethanol. So I'll put second gen here. And these are our first generation biofuels. What we can do here is compare these. All right, so if you look at the net energy balance, all right, when it comes to biodiesel, 3.2. All right, we talked about that's pretty good. All right, when it comes to ethanol, 1.34, not so good. And then you have cellulosic right there in the middle. All right, and then reduction of greenhouse gases. When you look at the three, what you notice is where the real savings are is with cellulosic. You can have up to 91% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by making fuel out of the waste product of different plants. All right, cost doesn't really matter too much, but if we look at gallons per acre, all right, here you go. With biodiesel, all right, not so good. With ethanol, there's potential there, but take a look at cellulosic. All right, gallons per acre, you're looking at tremendous amount of potential here with cellulosic as an energy source. All right, so just kind of reflecting on this, you can look at biodiesel as having good potential as a fuel source. All right, with ethanol, I call it the weakest of the three, but here's where our potential lies with the cellulosic ethanol. So in regards to fuel sources as an alternative to gasoline, it looks like cellulosic, and then hopefully what's not on this chart is algae. All right, again, that's still in development, still its experimental stage, it's not ready yet, but with cellulosic ethanols and algae is where our potential lies. All right, basically because of the net energy balance, the reduction in greenhouse gases, and how much of it we can get out per acre of product. All right, so there's so many different biofuels and ways to obtain it. All right, there's a lot of opportunity here, lots of potential. But how important is it for us? All right, just want to stop here for a second and take a look at some of the recent developments. All right, in King of Prussia in Pennsylvania in January of 13, all right, our Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack announced that there is $25 million going to fund research and development for the next generation renewable energy and high-value bio-based products from different sources. All right, so I just want to show you here that there's money and research going into this biofuel industry, and that's one of the reasons why it has such a backing and such an ability to move forward and compete with other fuel sources. And if you take a look here, the Secretary Tom Vilsack talked about the USDA's continuing investments are proving a critical piece of Obama's strategy to spur innovation and clean bioenergy right here at home and to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Right, the advances made through this research will help boost local economies, all right, throughout rural America, creating and sustaining jobs while moving our nation toward a clean energy economy. So this was all talked about and established in the 2008 Farm Bill, which funded research and help increase the availability of alternative renewable fuels and bio-based products. Okay, so this is where the money is at. And if you take a look here, just to go through real quick, if you look at the amount of money, all right, $5 million at Kansas State University, there's a project to look at the ability of oilseed to be used as a cost-effective biofuel. All right, Ohio State University, lots of money going into research where they're trying to work with anaerobic digestion systems. Okay, and then down here, $6.8 million, the USDA's research and development monies are going into converting forest residues. So basically when they cut a forest down, all the waste product, the sticks and the leaves and the wood left over, they're trying to convert forest residues or horse manure or switchgrass or other things into biofuels. So a lot of money and of research and development and a lot of subsidies are there for the biofuel industry, which provides potential in the future as a fuel source. All right, so maybe someday you will be driving in a biofuel car. All right, it might not look very much like these. It might look more or less like this. Okay, this is an E85, an 85% ethanol blend. All right, maybe someday you'll be driving in this bioethanol car from Ford. In general, we have to take a look at some of these questions. Let's think here. What type of biofuel do you think is the most promising to solve the United States energy problems? If any, you can think about that. What are your thoughts on using food crops as fuel? And what ripple effect could this have on consumers? All right, something to think about. And then lastly, do you think the positive impacts of biofuels outweigh the negatives? Are they worth pursuing? All right, so those are just a couple of things that you can think about. All right, these are the questions that you have to really answer. All right, environmental science gives us the knowledge. It's now up to you as an informed citizen to make choices. All right, and hopefully the information that we provide you will give you what you need to make the right choices. Thanks.